But when we analyzed all of these factors together, we found that there is only one factor that explains variation in quality, and that was the socio-economic profile of these students. People from better families, in whichever schools they go, and whatever that school does, so long as that school has uh, better buildings, that school is considered to be of quality. It was also found that not only that, it is the socio-economic profile of the teachers. I mean, the teachers who are good communicator, who comes from uh, richer families, they are more articulate, they present themselves better. I mean, somehow they are able to influence the quality. So I do not know how we can use this knowledge for improving the quality. For example, a few data that is missing that I could not see. I mean, whether all Tibetan children are going to the Tibetan school, or you are finding a phenomena that no, many of them, and particularly better of them, better not as much academically, but as much who belongs to better social class, are preferring to go schools other than the Tibetan school. If that is your experience, then I think there is something serious about the school education. Uh, in fact, I was going through those reports, and I was finding that the focus is that it is only the teacher, or mainly the teacher, who plays the most important role. Theoretically true. A good teacher with committed, dedicated students in any kind of surroundings would be able to provide or create an environment for quality education. But when you are doing these things at some large scale, then it is the content, what you are teaching, uh, the technology that you use, the teachers, the students, and most importantly, the whole ecosystem, the environment that you create for the learning. I think they all become important. So one thing that was coming to my mind, and as Professor Krishna Kumar was indicating, that not only the teacher education program, but in some way, if we could do some kind of assessment of the existing schools. Of course, you have done it from the official side of about 4 schools, but then people knew and they that it is the official survey. But if some kind of an objective assessment about all of these factors, then I think we can come up with as to what is missing. Maybe it has everything, and a little bit of change here and there would serve the purpose, or maybe there is a possibility that it requires a lot to be done. Finally, though it is not the case with Tibetan school, fortunately, that sometime in order to bring schools closer to places where people are, where children are, uh, we do not take care of the critical mass and the some basic number of, or some minimum necessary numbers of teachers and the students. But here, the situation is different. I think every school has on an average about 1,000 to 700 to about 1,200, and some schools are better. So that critical mass is there. Teachers are there. Of course, there has been one concern raised in your report, that teacher turnout, but I don't think a 10% turnout is too high. And I think teachers have been staying in your school for the fairly good number of teachers who are there for 10 to 15 years. So the teachers are staying. But lastly, and to conclude, of course, what you mentioned about the qualities of teachers and about gurus, these are very, very necessary. But sadly, howsoever best efforts you make, that kind of material for teachers, at least as of now or in the Indian situation, is not available. Uh, of course, the teacher education program may try to inculcate and develop those values in them, but learning in a classroom environment about certain values and practicing what they have learned in a classroom situation, two very, very different things. I don't know what is the situation in Tibetan school, but in many of the Indian schools, the problem is that they see teaching as a career, as an opportunity to make income, to become gainfully employed. People keep on applying for many different. For example, it's a very common practice for people to do their B.Ed also just in case. And then they also carry on doing a number of things, and they keep on applying for many kinds of job opportunities. Not necessarily the teaching there is their first choice for a good majority of them. Now, so long as that is the case, that they are seeing teaching as a career, teaching as an opportunity to provide them income, then I think the approach to developing them, to training them, and to making them work in a school system requires altogether a different approach than the very idealistic image of a teacher and that idealistic approach of promoting quality. And there, I'm sad to note that and to say that, but then I find that one factor which makes the difference between a government schools and so-called private school is that in those schools where the administration is quite tough, is strict, sometimes to the extent of being very autocratic, they have been able to take work from their teachers who are less qualified and sometimes less educated. I'm not suggesting that we should do that, but I think we need to learn from all of these for the overall improvement of the qualities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Of course, there is abundance of evidence that clearly suggest that what happens in the classroom would really depend to a large extent on the kinds of teachers we have in the classrooms. That's very clear. In fact, some research has clearly suggested that a quality teacher can really change completely the academic trajectory of low-performing schools. But of course, how do we really get quality teachers? Of course, it really depends on how we prepare them. Hence, teacher education programs have a crucial role to play in terms of what teachers we're going to have in our classrooms. What I think is very important is really to develop kind of like a teaching standards so that all our teachers are really prepared according to those standards. That is what we do in California. For example, state of California would really emphasize certain standards. They are called teaching standards. We have 6 of them. And some of these standards would really emphasize pedagogical techniques. Some of them would emphasize content knowledge. But more importantly so, they would emphasize how can we really make these teachers reflective teachers? How can we really encourage these teachers to become lifelong learners? And so on the basis of these teaching standards, then at my campus, we develop teacher education courses. And we make sure that all the courses that we offer, and I tell you, we offer lots of courses. And we meet very frequently as faculty members, and we make sure that all our courses, course objectives, and in conjunction with course objectives, course activities are really aligned so closely, as best as we could, so that these things really address those teaching standards. I think that would be kind of very important. And then also I was thinking about this, teacher socialization that Professor Kumar talked about. And within the Tibetan context, I think it is very important for us to really at least make an attempt to really understand how our teachers are being prepared in other Indian institutes. Because we really must know how they were socialized in those teacher education sites. Because if you don't have any idea of how they were socialized, then it would be so difficult for us to provide training or in-services or additional professional development that they might need. So that would be very important. And then also I was thinking in terms of that reflective aspect of teachers. This is what I do in my class as well, because I truly believe a reflective teacher will always, on a sustained manner, will investigate his teaching practices. His actually classroom teaching is not done as the bell rings. In fact, it continues further. He will be really thinking, how did I do in my class today? Did I really do well? Did I reach this journey or this, this Thiring or Themba? Did I really implement my classroom, teaching techniques properly or not? So that is very important. And in terms of looking at the importance of this, I think this Buddhist, institution of Buddhist philosophy as a critical aspect of teacher education program will really help us a lot. I think in the Tibetan context, we would not have problem with teachers being peaceful, calm. They seem to come, fairly peaceful and calm. But of course, there are other elements, that we really need to pay attention, particularly this reflective aspect of the, teaching profession. So I think, because how do we become reflective? The educational philosophy will provide that lens for us, because without some kind of structure, I would not become reflective. How do I become reflective? When I look at cultural context, when I look at my classroom environment context, when I look at my own teaching profession context, then I become reflective. So I think there is need to really provide some kind of like educational philosophy which really help them to really focus on their reflection, and then a lot of these good things would take place. And then, of course, within the Tibetan context, I think there is really need for us to raise the status of teaching profession. Then only we would be able to attract qualified teachers. Not only that, we would have, qualified students in the pipeline to ensure that we have this, sustained supply of teachers in order to meet the demands of the profession itself. So I was thinking, how do we make this teaching profession attractive? One sort of that came to my mind is, I think hopefully Sejong will institute a teacher kind of like award. That would be very nice, really, like he has instituted for the students. That may, bring, some kind of like, might highlight the status a little bit. And then definitely I hope Sejong will consider this very seriously. I definitely appreciate what he has done in terms of this Tibet Policy Institute. In the similar line of thinking, I think we need a teacher development center, a center that becomes the kind of provides space for the teachers to share their experiences, perspectives, a center that would bring teachers together on a very sustained sort of like, period of time where they will exchange among themselves, where we will invite scholars and educators and whatnot. And then they will get excited. They will go back to the classrooms with very renewed energy, highly kind of like revitalized. And so I think that is very important. Not only that, I think this center will then provide, in fact, avenues for them to share their own professional experiences. Right now, it seems we do not have a kind of a channel or avenue. And so we might really institute, for example, some kind of like journal, or because publications are very powerful. People like to be acknowledged. People like to see their works in print form. So I think that will really excite this teaching profession to a large extent. And then, of course, there is nowadays a lot of sort of interest in terms of technology in the classroom and this and that. I mean, really, I would definitely, would like to offer my suggestion that we need to be very careful in terms of what we might begin to institute as an innovative, teaching practice. Because I've seen this in America, really, in a very sort of like we get into technology, and our classrooms really look more like video game kind of a place. People have all kinds of whiteboards, this and that. But in the process of being involved in this technology, we really forget the child. And the classroom and teaching is for the child. If the child is ignored, whatever, like resources you have in the classroom, it's really a kind of a useless. So that's what's happening in America, really, to a large extent. We are so caught up in this technology stuff. All my students, they wanted to research, how can technology solve my students' poverty? I mean, really, that is the kind of mindset we have. So I really would like to suggest that we should become very careful in terms of what we want to institute, because sometimes we forget the most effective strategies are right in our plain sight. For example, we must prepare very good teachers. And how do we prepare good teachers? That means they must be equipped in terms of, what lesson plan, how to develop sound, carefully sequenced, carefully developed lesson plans. And then we hope that they will really implement that carefully planned lesson, in the classroom. And really what research has shown is a good teacher in the classroom with a carefully planned lesson and then implement it. That will do all the wonders in the world. We really don't need a lot of this and that. Really we need to focus. How do we prepare this quality teacher? And that will be a really very good service. And I truly believe that teaching is a very noble profession. The impact is just powerful. And now, may I say just one thing I forgot during my introduction. For me, this involvement in this advisory committee is really a personally meaningful experience for me. As a Tibetan educator, I lived with guilt for many, many years, since I haven't really served our Tibetan children. So whenever I get invitation from Dharamsala, I get very excited, because this is kind of like my redemption. So I hope they will continue to invite me so that I begin to feel a little bit relieved. So thank you very much. I think I'm done.
Thank you very much. May I request Shri Arun Kumar ji? Arun Kapoor. Thank you very much. May I request Shri Arun Kumar ji? Arun Kapoor ji.
I mean, after these really profound conversations that we just had, I just want to go back, because I'm a school teacher, and I just want to start from that perspective, that what is the role of a teacher? I mean, that seems to be, I think, a very crucial idea. So if we conceive or think of the role of a teacher is to go and teach, then we're starting on the wrong premise, because I can go into a classroom and teach for 2 hours and nobody learns anything. And I can come away being very satisfied with what I've done. So I need to understand that my role as a teacher is not to teach, but to help children learn. And if that is my role, then I must be in the learning mode myself all the time. These are just basic practical things that like I said, I'm not here. So the role of the teacher is crucial. And it sounds sometimes almost, just words, but actually changing the role of the teacher from teaching to learning makes a huge, I think it's my time to get attacked by the cybersecurity expert who was here yesterday. Must have been Israeli.
They're listening in Shanghai.
Talk
loudly. They need to learn this too.
So that for me was an important aspect, that we need to kind of clarify what is the role of the teacher, and if the role of the teacher is to help children learn, and then she must be in the learning mode herself, and then it fits in with everything else that has been said so far, as to because only then will they inspire students to become great learners. If they are great learners, then they will inspire people to become great learners. And the teachers should also feel secure to make mistakes just as much as students do, and then learn from their mistakes. I mean, the whole point of expecting somebody to walk in just because of you are of a certain age to be perfect in some ways is actually defeating the whole purpose. And the whole idea is that we go on a journey together. And this is something that has been said many times, that the whole point of a teacher from earlier on being a sage on a stage is no longer correct. It has to be a guide on the side. And it's very difficult to be a guide on the side, actually. It's very easy to be a sage on the stage with the font of all knowledge. So this transition is also a very crucial transition, and it's a transition that needs to be learned as much as experienced. And we've been talking a lot about the holistic aspect of education, and there is something, I'm leading a battle, and I hope to enlist all of you in my battle, and Oxford University Press is not being, it's the spelling of the word holistic. At the moment, everybody the world over spells it with the H-O-L-I. H-O-L-I means a hole in the ground. It has to be spelled with W-H-O. I mean, that's the holistic that we want to put into place. And unfortunately, nobody takes me seriously. Everybody laughs like he does.
I'm laughing with you.
Thank you, thank you. But therefore, these things that make a lot of difference. I mean, you read the word holistic, I mean, whether you like it or not from your own educational background, it's a hole in the ground into which people can, and almost anything of importance can disappear. But on the other hand, if you read the word holistic, whether you like it or not, it encompasses everything. And if the teacher is only going to transact the syllabus, then again we are going to be, I've got a lot of things I wrote about teacher. Being a teacher, I was, when I was told that you could speak for 8 minutes, I just kind of, now it's 4 today, but it was changed. So I'm just going to quickly go into a little example of something that we did with schools in Delhi, the NDMC schools and primary schools, just as anecdotal. So I'll just stick to that for a bit. What used to happen was that in all of these schools, inspection used to take place. And inspection is just one of the most dangerous things that you can do to a school or to a teacher or to a child. Because you kind of put, it's like shining a headlamp into the eyes of a rabbit at night. They freeze. And the whole point gets lost. So we trying to move from inspection to introspection. And then we said that, this whole reflected nature was to be created. And so we created a team of people which are heads of different primary schools and other members who would visit, not inspect, would visit a school, and their only job was to find what was going right with the school. We all know what's going wrong with the school. And therefore, to be able to identify what was going right with the school, to be able to give a platform to the teachers to kind of show off, was just such a small step, but it made a huge difference. Within 3 months of these introspective teams going around, the moment they would arrive in a school, teachers would come out and grab them to take them into their classroom to show them what was being done in their classrooms. And that's just changed the mindset. Because I don't think there's no teacher in the world, I don't think so, who gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a bad teacher today. They might not quite actively say that I'm going to be a great teacher or a good teacher. Some might be indifferent. But I doubt if there are any who get up to say that I'm going to be a bad teacher. So the space that the school gives to the teacher to understand herself and her own journey will be the only way forward for her to help the students to go down that journey themselves. And they also need to understand that the world is changing, the worldview, and therefore their worldview needs to change. And we said just now, was just said that the teachers need to transcend the education system through which they have themselves come. The conversations about teaching and learning, about theories of learning, various educational philosophers, psychological principles, so that the teachers understand the reason behind why they need to do things differently in a school for different students and constantly evolve as teachers themselves is crucial. Because if I come into a classroom and I have a one-size-fits-all solution for all the 30 kids, then I deserve to be treated like it's a one-size-fits-all for all the teachers that exist in the school. So this idea of creating teacher development center that was just suggested. I think that's a great idea. But it should not just be one center. It should be devolved into the school so that each school is an environment in which these conversations can take place and sharings need to be done. The other issue is about teacher development, and it should not be seen as something that needs to be fulfilled as part of an external mandate, right? But as something that the teachers themselves are responsible for. Because unless they take this ownership of their own journey forward, it's always be a tick box kind of situation where what I call death by PowerPoint, which most of the teachers are subjected to, and nothing happens. I mean, you go, you sit there, and nothing happens. So teachers should be encouraged to chart their own learning trajectory and then get support from the schools or organizations to achieve the same. And of course, within the budget, philosophy, and overarching objectives of the Tibetan education. I was a little wary about this putting together of a teacher professional development manual. I mean, because there is no complete curriculum for teacher development as a continuous process. Because the moment you print it, you've frozen it, right? And then there is no scope to go beyond that. So it might be true for today, but it's impossible for you to come up with a manual that will have everything in it. And then the moment you have a manual, it kind of puts a brake on thinking beyond the manual. I again have another problem with this phrase that's used very often of thinking outside the box. I can't stand that phrase because I say when you think in the box first, you learn how to think there. So therefore, by creating a manual, we will be stopping the thinking of outside the manual. That was just an... so I would then rather see that manual as a living document, maybe on a website, so that it should be as strong that the students and the teachers could add to that manual as they experience and go along. And the professional development should not be only in the domain area, but also in non-academic. And I raised this point yesterday, and I think I got shot down by everybody. But I feel very strongly about it, that at this point in time in schools, we only look at the cognitive side, but there is the social development, the physical development, the spiritual, social, emotional. There are 5 areas of development, and most schools at this point in time look at just the cognitive development. Maybe some of them look at the physical development, but the other areas need to be looked at, and therefore we need to understand that the teachers themselves need to be looked at in all these 4 development. If I'm coming into a school in the morning with a whole bunch of stuff, social issues that I'm facing, which is talked about, it'll be practically impossible for me to be a good teacher in the classroom, no matter what happens. I'll just share again a 30-second story of something that happened to me when I was teaching in England. I was teaching geography, and I used to teach English in an English school, in a very expensive English school, and I used to love it when the parents would come to see this third world type teaching English to their kids, but it was fine. So one day I was walking around, there was some piece of work that I'd asked the class to do, and there was this girl who was just not doing anything, and I asked her what had happened, and she started crying. And she had left home that morning with being told by her parents that they were separating, and at the end of the school day, she would have to choose whether she went to the father's house or to the mother's house. Now, what geography was she going to learn? And if I was going to be a very strict teacher and not a facilitator of learning, I could have actually done a lot of damage there. And therefore, the ability to help children to stop learning at some point in time and to take a break is as important. So I'll just quickly go down. We've talked about the Scandinavian countries where a lot of prestige is given, but I don't know whether you've read about a practice that's also done there in Finland, when a pregnant mother is actually given a cardboard box. When the child is born, everything that you require for the child rearing practice is in that box. And that box also doubles up as the bed. So almost every single child in Finland has slept in a similar bed. And the kind of content of that cardboard box, as the word has gone about, has brought about such a difference in child bearing. And what Professor Krishna Kumar was talking about, the first 8 to 10 years, including preschool years, are absolutely crucial in making what happens. So if you look at the research or the survey that was done, that in the Central Tibetan Schools Administration, the school retention is the highest, you know. So why is that? I mean, there are same people, same kind of people entering the school teaching profession, but for some reason the retention there, and maybe the work conditions rather than not just the salary. And therefore that comes to my last kind of point, that every school should have its main idea is to make a platform for the teachers to showcase their inherent talent and to give recognition within and outside their community. And skill and talent of teaching being recognized would motivate others. So we must make heroes of the good teachers. It's very easy to kind of put all the ills of the world down on bad teachers. But actually speaking, there are some really wonderful people, admirable people in the teaching profession, even in the Indian context or the Tibetan context. Yesterday evening at the the school there, met this young man who teaches science and maths. I mean, he's the kind of guy any school in the world would love to have. He's motivated, he knows his domain area very well, he's very much in contact with the children, and he needs to be celebrated so that he becomes a role model for other people to join the so I will just stop that in terms of, there are two things. One is to kind of create these role models to attract people into the teaching profession, and the other is strategy to retain these people, because then what's happening now is bright people, when you make them role models and you bring them into the limelight of other people, there are these non-teaching corporates who will come and grab them and pay them kind of monies that nobody can, whether it's people like the United Nations who retain the same teachers over and again and send back reports. Yeah, he doesn't do that, I know for a fact. But there are large parts of UN programs that take the great teachers away from schools. So retention is as important as attraction, and creating a good working environment actually is much more important than just, I mean, of course you need to pay well, but what you said, good management-teacher relationships, providing support for the teachers, and growth opportunity for teachers. Where do they see themselves 5 years down the line would be stuff. So I'm not going to go into it. There was some other stuff, but I think just to say this, teachers are not all bad.
Sikong pointed out in class primary section, when it was the English medium, students' interaction in primary section